Yeah, it's about as good as can be expected. It's storm season, so at least there's rain. There's also giant pieces of ice and really, really big wind. But it is what it is.
That's par for the course. That's not particularly apocalyptic in your
Oh
neck of
yeah,
the
oh
woods.
yeah, exactly. Like if it was like a tornado full of sharks and Ebola, that would be abnormal. Otherwise,
Okay.
it's just the
Sharks
regular stuff.
or Ebola tornadoes. That's fine.
Yes, one or the other I can deal with, not both at the same time. Which, by the way, Sci-Fi, if you're going to make that show, I'm requesting a royalty cut.
That's I think that's the only place they have left to go. So that'll work out really well. Are you ready though to talk about not to do some spec scripts for ridiculous sci-fi movies, but instead talk about the IT news of the week? Does that sound good to you, Tom?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yep.
Let's do this.
All right, then let's get it going in 3, 2, 1. Hello, all, and welcome to the Gestalt IT Rundown, your weekly look at the IT news of the week. I'm your host, Rich Stroffolino. I'm an editor at Gestalt IT, and joining me from across this great nation of ours is the one, the only, the networking nerd himself, Tom Hollingsworth. Tom, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Rich. I'm ready to give it a go.
Well, let's get it started with a little news. Tell us if it is in fact newsy or not. First up here, we have some Google news. Google announced general availability of its healthcare API to help healthcare providers translate and convert data stored in imaging systems and medical record software. Google's cloud is offered but not required as a central storage solution. I'm sure they would appreciate it, however. Microsoft Azure has a similar healthcare API designed to help its healthcare customers connect to electronic health records and information sources. So this is not entirely new in the public cloud space, but Google getting on board here. Given the timeliness, Tom, news or not?
It's not news until they figure out how to sell ads against it. When you pop up an MRI image and it's got, oh, need a knee replacement? Check out this doctor.
Would you like to buy a
I
heart
don't
valve?
understand why are they doing this? This doesn't make sense. Other than, hey, healthcare is a thing.
I mean, API is just a way to for them effectively is just a way to ingest stuff into their cloud, which at some point will theoretically make them money or at least gain them market share, and they can sell services against that. So, I mean, that makes sense on its face, right?
Do you want Google having access to your medical images?
I'm
I
not saying
don't.
I'm not saying I do. I'm just saying from Google's perspective, it makes there's a use case for that is all I'm saying. Next up here in acquisitions that will actually seemingly happen news, it's been a year since Nvidia announced it was planning to acquire Mellanox in a deal worth $6.9 billion. The two have been kind of cruising along since then, getting all of the regulatory approvals, and now the final regulatory hurdle seems to have been passed after receiving approval from China's antitrust authorities. Both Baidu and Alibaba are major customers for both companies, and with existing trade tensions, it wasn't quite sure if this deal would be approved either on an antitrust basis or just to spite one country or another. And that's essentially what held up the Qualcomm purchase of NXP in the long run. The whole Broadcom-Qualcomm acquisition was tied up on the U.S. side as well. The deal is now expected to close, though, April 27th. So, Tom, news or not?
This is news because this gives Nvidia basically everything they need to go to compete with Intel. They have all the other chipsets. Mellanox, if you don't know who Mellanox is, you're using their equipment. You just don't know it because they've provided chips for a lot of other things in the past. This is just bringing them under that umbrella. They do networking, they do storage, they do a lot of other stuff. Yeah, this is news just because now there, I feel, is a credible competitor to Intel in that space. And if you're an Intel person watching this, you better be paying attention.
Yeah, really kind of kind of achieving that full stack play for a lot of what Nvidia's long-term visions are. So it's really interesting, and we will see how it proceeds once it finally closes later this month. Next up, Cisco is integrating its SD-WAN with Google Cloud platforms, Google Global Network, and Google Anthos Kubernetes platform, offering a new turnkey multi-cloud networking fabric called Cisco SD-WAN Cloud Hub with Google Cloud, not clunky at all in a name. Previews of the offering will be in the second half of 2020, with general availability expected in the first half of 2021. Cisco and Google Cloud playing nice for SD-WAN. News or not here, Tom?
This is not really news to me because this is adding the last box to the checklist. You support AWS, you support Azure. Nobody supports Oracle because they have their own with Telari, but why would you want to? I mean, eventually you'll have support for every other cloud provider. Okay, great. No, and I know that kind of sounds like I'm nonplussed about the whole thing, but I don't really know what the use case list for people who need SD-WAN and use GCP and use Cisco looks like, but it can't be that long. But I'm sure there's a lot of dollar signs behind it, because why else would you develop a technology like this?
Someone got bags of cash as a result of this. Let's just put it that way. Next up here, Cloudflare launched the Is BGP Safe Yet site, allowing people to check if their ISP has implemented checking routes using resource public key infrastructure to make the BGP protocol that's redundant BGP more stable and secure. The site prompts a browser to load two pages, one legitimately routed, one invalid, essentially simulating a route leak, which is what this is all meant to prevent. ISPs that only load legitimate routes pass. Cloudflare says ISPs like AT&T, what I'm using right now, the Swedish telecom Telia, and Japanese telecom NTT all pass, among others. There were others that passed with kind of varying shades of approval from Cloudflare, while Verizon, Comcast, Orange, Vodafone, among many other ISPs, were listed as failing. BGP Safe Yet site, Tom, news or not?
I like this site. I think Cloudflare does a lot of work behind the scenes to make things more, I don't know, safe, secure, robust. I mean, when you think about it, when you're Cloudflare and half of the internet uses you already, if someone does something stupid in BGP, it makes you look bad. A couple weeks ago, I wrote a blog post, and the title was pretty easy enough. BGP hell is other people, because most of the time, whether it's a Russian ISP accidentally sending 80% of the world's traffic through their servers for 20 minutes and capturing the whole thing, or whatever else happens that causes BGP to go down on a regular basis, we've long since passed the point where we can trust that other people are going to do things right. That was the internet of the 60s. We live in the internet of the 20s now, and assume people are going to do stupid things and create controls to prevent them from doing it. So thank you, Cloudflare, for at least pushing this idea forward.
Yeah, a little public shaming of ISPs never hurt anyone, I guess, other than some ISPs' feelings. Sorry about that. I guess, whatever. And last up on news or not, Microsoft announced it's developing a system that can distinguish between security and non-security software bugs 99% of the time using machine learning, with the ability to identify critical, high-priority security bugs 97% of the time. The system was trained on 13 million work items and bugs from 47,000 developers across GitHub and Azure DevOps repositories, with a data set approved by security experts, so looking at those and kind of making sure everything's getting classified correctly. Microsoft says the model is in production internally and plans to open source the methodology on GitHub. Tom, news or not?
News, because we can programmatically find security bugs. Doesn't mean we can programmatically stop people from creating them. But, hey, one little step at a time. Once we have the ability to shame you for writing crappy code, then we can teach you how to not do it.
Does this strike you, though, as maybe, I know they're saying they're going to open source the methodology, but is a ambiguous enough term to say, like, hey, we might have some secret sauce in there? If this was all of a sudden rolled out as a paid GitHub tier where it's like, hey, why don't we just have our machine learning look for some bugs here and some security stuff? I could see that being useful to a lot of organizations.
Galaxy brain on Rich.
All right. And next, first up here on our discussion, interesting story from the New York Times, where I go for all of my IT news. They were talking to three former Dropbox engineers, and they said that since 2018, Dropbox has offered bug bounties on Zoom vulnerabilities as well as other services used by the company. Dropbox has previously announced that they've had vendor bug bounties before, considering how many third parties are integrating into their service. I think makes sense. This is the first time that we've actually seen a company named as a result of that. Dropbox has kind of went as far as having their own security engineers review the bugs and look for related problems before passing them on to Zoom, which seems like an extra step there. The researchers said that when vulnerabilities were discovered, Zoom was slow to fix them, citing major vulnerability found at a 2019 HackerOne event in Singapore, which took 3 months to patch, and only after two related bugs with the same root cause were publicly made available. Tom, have you ever heard of another company doing bug bounties for their like integrated vendors or business partners or stuff like that? And how unusual it is for Dropbox to go that extra step for Zoom specifically?
It is not the most common thing. I mean, I would not expect to see a company like, I don't know, CDW doing bug bounty stuff for WebEx.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, it means that Dropbox has enough investment in the platform that they want it to succeed. They want to fix the problems. They're literally paying people to do it. Here's the thing, though, and this is a narrative that's come up over the last 6 weeks, 7 weeks or so, ever since Zoom's usage has taken off like what 250, 300%.
Something crazy like that, yeah.
Yeah. So, in an informal poll that was taken in a Slack channel that I'm a part of the other day, basically, here's what it boils down to. Oh, Zoom's insecure and they steal all your information. Yeah, but Teams is a dumpster fire. Cisco is an expensive dumpster fire. And who on earth still uses GoToMeeting, except for very specific webinars?
Which GoToMeeting,
And ultimately,
aka Central's had its own, bevy of security issues in the past too, and privacy
oh, no,
concerns.
no, no. That's totally true. Every
Mhm.
one of them has had security issues, vulnerability problems, performance issues. But let's sweep all that under the rug now, because here's a whipping boy that we can take to the woodshed, because Zoom did bad things and they've always done bad things. Mhm. You're right, they have. And even knowing that things are not working the way they do, even seeing all the things that we've pulled apart, you're still using them. You're still going to them and you're still preferring that platform over the other ones. And if you really, really want to give me grief about the vulnerabilities that you're finding in Zoom and how you can't discuss top secret code word classified briefing information on there, why don't you go shoot me a TikTok music reaction video about that? By the way, if you do that, the irony will cause your cell phone to combust, and then the people who are monitoring it where that application lives will get a notification and they can let me know.
Do you think that these kind of third party bug bounty reviews and that kind of stuff are either more common than we maybe know about from other security teams, or should be, given the level of integration? I'm thinking of like public cloud providers that kind of, by API access we're just talking about, kind of let a lot of different people into their systems in varying degrees, essentially have data pipelines and stuff like that. I could see a lot of companies theoretically benefiting from that, so that they don't get these kind of disclosures, actively kind of putting their money where their mouth is, in regard to this, especially for, especially when you're dealing with, Zoom is, I don't know. I think maybe I thought Zoom was a bigger company than it was, but I could see for a lot of smaller startups where, you see usage all of a sudden spike, and that they are a 10-person team or something that don't have an extensive security operation. I'm surprised we don't hear more about that, from like public cloud providers, for example.
Yeah, I think it's a lot more common than we realize, because they just have NDAs that prevent us from knowing about it.
Which is true.
And if it's not, it should be.
All right. Next up here, last week Verizon announced it intended to acquire the video conferencing. Speaking of video conferencing, an event platform, BlueJeans Network, in a D Street Journal reported was worth about $500 million. Verizon said they were targeting the acquisition for about a year, so kind of pre everyone being quarantined, and BlueJeans was already a Verizon authorized reseller, so there was an existing relationship there. Verizon seems bullish about building in BlueJeans teleconferencing capabilities into their 5G rollout, which I've seen some people kind of doing some hand-wringing about competition concerns. If Verizon has a blessed video conferencing solution, is its rivals about to be services without a network? And do you see a teleconference land rush on the way, Tom?
Mm, no, I don't. And here's why. How many people who are watching this show knew that Blue Jeans was a thing before Verizon announced that they were going to buy them? I did,
Not
because I've
me.
used it before in a very specific setting. It was a site license for the university. I did a video conference call with them before, and they actually used it to record the conference. Okay, if I
Mhm.
asked people to name the top 5 video conferencing apps that they use or have used, you would have named FaceTime before you named Blue Jeans. I get that Verizon wants to say that they were on the cusp of this. I'm sure that
Mhm.
they were talks that they were going to acquire BlueJeans, because let's face it, anything that generates more packets for Verizon is good. And Verizon using BlueJeans as a bundled app on Android phones to do video conferencing probably makes the most sense, because Lord knows what the conferencing app that Google is going to have next year is going to be called, even though it's probably still going to be Hangouts in some form or another. Here's the ultimate problem, though. Just because Verizon owns it and pushes it doesn't mean that people are going to use it. For the same reason that WebEx and GoToMeeting and Teams isn't getting a lot of use. Or hell, if Slack suddenly came up with a video chat feature, I doubt people would use it as effectively as they could, because people want ease of use, people want familiarity, and I don't think that Verizon is going to be able to build those kinds of things into the platform, no matter how stable it is, to make people want to start using it. Now, to be fair, congratulations to the people at BlueJeans. It's a great exit. Verizon will probably take care of you. I mean, it's better than being on
One way
your
or the
own.
other.
But ultimately, I don't see this gaining you any market share. I don't see us, a year and a half from now being like, hey, let's hop on a quick BlueJeans call to go over this proposal. And no, let's be fair. If video is going to survive and be sustainable, we're still going to see it in the same rarefied air as we see everybody else. You don't go out and start a new cloud company today because you're immediately in 8th place. So you're still one place ahead of Google or of Oracle Cloud. But you don't go out and assume that you can solve the video chat problem, video conferencing problem, by buying an existing company. Good luck, Verizon. Let me know when you want to go. If AT&T announces tomorrow that they're buying Zoom, then we got a horse race.
Yeah. Well, so I mean, to me, this seems like a B2B where, hey, you buy Verizon Business Internet, and you get X tier of BlueJeans teleconferencing for free or something like that. And even still, like, how many of those kind of integrations are there, and people still either don't realize that they're there or still prefer their own solution and that kind of stuff? I guess the concern would be is if, in that initial 5G rollout, if they're getting, packet status or whatever you want to say, to have, clearly better video quality call or something like that. Or, the more sinister version is they degrade every other, theoretically every other service. I think that's the concern. I always think, even with the state of net neutrality rules or lack thereof, the way that they are, that's like a big black eye if that ever comes out. So I would hope that there is enough competition in the ISP, like on the business ISP market, that they wouldn't want to do that anyway, right?
I would hope that they wouldn't do that. If only there was some kind of regulation in place that would make it illegal for them to do that.
I mean, we can dream. Okay. Next up here, company coming, kind of on the opposite end, Verizon, a very big company, a new company on the scene, a startup called Alkira came out of stealth with a networking as a service offering called Cloud Services Exchange to allow for simplified multi-cloud networking. So let me lay it out for you here, Tom. They do this through a network of globally distributed multi-cloud POPs, which handle routing and networking services. Alkira presents customers with a point-and-click interface to select network services and clouds to connect to, essentially abstracting all, which they claim they can get cloud infrastructure set up in 40 minutes. I'm going to say that's marketing, but the idea is that it's very quick. The company was founded by Viptela founder Amir Khan, so there is a track record there for some networking know-how and kind of identifying how to make like ease of use and kind of streamlined software-defined networking a thing. Alkira is providing clouds. Kind of the idea here is that Alkira will provide maybe a cloud scale colo cloud on ramp for a lot of businesses. Do you like what you're seeing in these initial? I know we need to get a little bit more details, but how does that sound to you as an initial pitch coming out of stealth?
I mean, it's where a lot of the companies who are building SD-WAN today are landing, because there's no market for the hardware. There's no market for people that are trying to jump in and be like, oh, I'm going to provide you with hardware, because everybody's doing that now. And all of the hardware providers have been purchased now. Now that Palo Alto owns CloudGenix and VMware owns VeloCloud and Cisco owns Viptela, I mean, there aren't really a whole lot left. So when you look at who's left behind, it's the service providers. I mean, the biggest, if you want to say unicorn out there that hasn't been purchased, is Ariaka, and they are offering a service. You can't buy a box from Ariaka. You rent a service from them. And that's where the value is now, especially for things like Cloud On-Ramp, because I'm not just going to buy a box and then wave my hands and say, connect to Amazon. I need somebody to manage that for me. And for a company like Alkira, that's where the money is. Again, great pedigree. It's the folks from VeloCloud. They may know something about SD-WAN, I've heard. I'm trying to get a briefing scheduled with them. Like literally, I got an email 2 weeks ago. I'd never heard of this company because they're that deep in stealth, and
Mm.
then they come out of stealth, and I'm like, oh, cool. Need to learn more. So stay tuned, because as this starts rolling out and we start seeing more about that, we'll definitely have some updates here. I'll probably have a post about it on gestaltit.com in a month or so, basically whenever we can get the briefing scheduled. But so far, I really like what I see, and I'm very curious to see where they go with it.
Yeah, for where the puck is going, if we're going to use some business cliches, and given the founding team, it kind of demonstrates some faith, that they've kind of been there before, they've seen that before, and it ultimately will come down to the execution, at least initially. I'm sure, like any company coming out of stealth, it will be, we'll be looking for some features, but it will maybe do one thing. I'm interested to get the briefing on it, so we'll be looking forward to that when it's up. Next up here is from a little bit more Google news. Google began rolling out Beyond Corp Remote Access this week. This is a zero-trust, cloud-based remote access tool that requires verification of context to grant remote access to an application. All data is routed to a proxy, which handles verification and reviews if a user has data access approval if they meet certain conditions to do so. This can allow admins to allow access only on machines up to date with patches, and providing some authentication on top of that. This is the latest expansion of Google's Beyond Corp platform, which has been used internally by the company. It's something that they've used for identity verification, not necessarily for remote access. But Tom, is this set to replace this not specifically beyond this remote access implementation by Google, but set to replace VPN for remote access?
I don't know. This is I don't know where Google's trying to go with this, to be honest with you. I get that there's value in this, but okay, literally all you're doing is checking boxes. Zero trust, be cloud enabled, whatever. I mean, just looking over the specs, is it like a reverse VPN? Is this so I can do remote support? I mean, these grand pie in the sky ideas that people have for tools like this never work out. I mean, it's like buying a $300 screwdriver set and using them as wood chisels, because that's what I need them to do now. So I don't know. I'm gonna have to take a wait and see approach on this one, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting given that, I don't know if necessarily if COVID-19 that this would even be out there, if this wouldn't just be something that Google is using internally and dog fooding and maybe building into a larger offering, kind of realizing the situation is we might as well roll this out. It's good enough for us. We'll provide it to our customers. I didn't see a pricing or anything like this. It seemed like this was just being rolled out to G Suite and Google Cloud users as an option. So, if it can work into your workflow and you have security concerns that a VPN can't address, that's it. It's an interesting approach, but yeah, I don't know necessarily how that rolls into a broader vision other than Google doing weird googly stuff.
So
Ultimately,
the other thing there, and this is actually something that I learned from the guys at Lightstep a couple of years ago when they did Cloud Field Day. Just because Google has a tool to do a thing doesn't mean that that's a thing you need a tool to do. That this is the biggest problem. I wrote a blog post about this recently. When you think about the ways this was actually in the BGP post, people do things in a certain way because they need scale and they need speed, and they don't need things like safety. So that's why you see things like, the guy who has a nail gun that has the safety guard cut off. Why? Well, it saves me 3 seconds grabbing the nail gun and putting it in. Yeah, it also means that if you are an untrained professional, you're going to put a nail through your foot sooner or later because of the likelihood of that to happen. So don't just use something because Google says you need to use it. Investigate the research use case for what you need, and then find a tool that fits the need. Don't try to change your need to fit the tool because Google says it's a good tool. You're going to cause massive problems.
All right, and finally here, Amazon updated its Edge Snowball offerings, aka Amazon ships some AWS to your location. The actual Snowball Edge storage optimized hardware is getting an upgrade, going up to 40 vCPUs running at 3.2 gigahertz and 80 gigabytes of RAM. 80 terabytes would be quite a lot of RAM, along with 80 terabytes of storage and a 1 terabyte SSD to kind of speed application performance. There's also an option to tether up to 12 Snowballs into a single S3 bucket for almost $1 petabyte of data. You're using these snowballs to maybe export data quickly via Express SneakerNet Amazon style. Perhaps more interesting, though, is AWS Ops Hub for Snow devices, which offers a GUI for management and configuration that can be done offline at secure locations, so you don't have to worry about things going over the internet. Previously, all of this was going over a command line. I did not realize, and seems just kind of weird for Amazon to do. AWS is also shipping all snowballs with identity and access management tools, because why weren't they doing this before? I don't know. But Tom, my big question, the GUI is my what interests me the most. Does this make it an even easier cloud migration path for organizations? And do you see this breaking down any barriers, or is anyone that's interested in the snowball to offload some stuff and eventually send it to the cloud, they're going to figure out the CLI stuff anyway?
This Snowball to me has always been such a randomly specific use case for very direct things that I always look at. So I have this old and I've talked about this before. There's an old tool that I used to use when Cisco was transitioning from traditional access points to lightweight access points. You needed to do some configuration work on the back end to make them work, and someone wrote a wrapper around the CLI commands that basically was like the worst coded VB app ever written. Like, you could only run 5 of them at a time. You had to stop the app every 45 minutes or it ate all the RAM on your system. But if you tried to do the commands on the command line, you would fail every time, because like they had some kind of magic sauce that made it work better. That's Snowball to me in a nutshell. Hi, we're going to ship you a virtual briefcase full of hard drives, and then you ship it back to us full. We ingest it, and now you're in the cloud, and you don't have to pay us the insane bandwidth cost of ingesting things into the cloud normally. If there's still somebody out there that thinks that a Snowball, Snowmobile, Snow Starship, whatever the crap we're going to call it this year is, like, if that's still a valid use case, cloud isn't as adopted as people would want us to believe, because ain't nobody needs to ingest that much data. So I feel like this is just kind of like maybe not polishing a turd. How about shining a snowball? We're putting a little extra niceness on the top, because maybe now ingesting data into the cloud isn't something that I want my senior engineers working on. It's something that my junior engineers should take care of, but I want to put guardrails on it so they can't screw anything up.
Also, just the idea of having 12 snowballs just like packed all together, like just hacked together with some cables and stuff like that to make this giant 1 petabyte S3 pool is just hilarious to me. But
It's like,
in a
it's
recent
the world's worst LAN party. That's what it is.
in a recent webinar we actually did with Commvault, we were talking about disaster recovery, and they actually cited this as that use case of why you need this briefcase full of you're moving off tape, you have a bunch of stuff that you need to move. You don't want to incur those huge bandwidth costs. So that specific thing, I can see a lot of organizations kind of having adopted cloud for production and stuff like that, but not necessarily moving their DR, or only slowly kind of experimenting with that, wanting to take that jump and needing that on ramp, that like very physical on ramp to get all that data to the cloud. I could definitely see that as a use case, whether you're adding, you're increasing CPU and RAM by 66%. I'm sure that makes things faster. I'm sure that your EC2 instances you're running locally to get everything started goes a little smoother. But yeah, ultimately, I don't think this just the addition of GUI doesn't change the game, but it's just surprising to me that Amazon wasn't there kind of from the beginning. Although maybe that just showed they didn't realize how much need or demand there would be for this, that they didn't have that developed already.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that just about does it for the Gestalt IT Rundown. Remember, this show is available as a podcast as well as live on YouTube every Wednesday at 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time at youtube.com/Gestalt IT Video. And you can also remember to check out all of Tom's great stuff. Tom, where can people find more of your stuff if they're so inclined?
The easiest way to get a hold of my content is to check out gestaltit.com. I've been writing a lot of articles recently, and I just premiered a new video series called Tomversations, because that's the coolest name ever. But it's 10-15 minute video where I dive into a technical topic and we discuss it. This one was about, strangely enough, SD-WAN and security. So you can get some thoughts around that there. But look for more of that content coming out soon. If you're a person that likes the dulcet tones of my voice explaining technology, I promise you it's the easiest way to fall asleep.
So if you are please tune in. Remember, we also have the videos available on our Facebook page, facebook.com/Gestalt IT, and we'll be back next Wednesday to talk about the IT news of the week in the week that was. Until then, for myself, for Tom Hollingsworth, for all of us in the Gestalt IT family, here's wishing you and yours to have the most super sparkly of days.